So all of that to say, I had this epiphany that authenticity was my secret to success, and then spent a lot of time trying out some other things, but at the same time reflecting, blogging, researching. And what I realized is that authenticity is something tangible. It is not simply be yourself. There's a richer definition of it, and that you can take action against it, especially in the working world where it's so easy to kind of get caught up in the inauthentic river and flow. And when I figured all that out, I was like, oh, damn, I got to go out and I talk about it. And here I am 6 years later, still like, Tom Cruise on Oprah's couch, excited, like preaching about authenticity.
Welcome to the Good Seed Podcast. I'm Allie.
And I'm Rachel.
Hey guys, welcome to another episode. Today I am so excited to introduce Erin Hatzikostas. We're super pumped about this one. She's a podcaster, she's the best-selling author. I can go on and on. I connected with her a while ago, and honestly, I can just go all day talking about the energy that this girl brings to the table. So Erin, she's a former corporate CEO turned professional pot stirrer, often referred to as the Mel Robbins for business. Erin is an internationally recognized leader on the impact of authenticity in the workplace. The CEO and founder of Be Authentic Inc., Erin is a global keynote speaker, author of 2 books, You Do You-ish and The 50% Rule, the co-host of the podcast Because Work Doesn't Have to Suck, and Coach Sultan. Her TED Talk was one of the top 20 globally most viewed TED Talks released in 2021. Her talks have reached hundreds of thousands of people, and her thought leadership has been featured on ABC, CBS, and published in Business Insider, Fast Company, Well and Good, among several others. Her company also conducted a national study on the impact of authenticity in the workplace. So without further ado, Erin, welcome to the Good Seed Podcast. I am pumped for this one.
We're so excited to have you. Thanks for being here.
And what full circle moment to see you, Allie, because we met under different circumstances. Yeah. And honestly, when you reached out, I know you read the book, you read my first book, yeah. And I remember you reaching out in that. But you're like, I love you. I've been following you. And I'm like, I didn't even know that. So I'm so excited to see that you're doing great things with Rachel. I'm excited to be here.
We are so excited to have you. And I think that we connected, and whenever I have those calls with you guys, I always try to genuinely get curious about the human in front of me on a human level, right? And I think your energy just speaks for itself, and it's amazing, what you bring to the table, your TED Talks, the conferences that you have. You're freaking hilarious. So I'm just glad to have you over.
Wait, can we tell people how we met? Because I don't want to leave them out. Can we say, yeah, so, it's so cool. So last March, I had sort of hit rock bottom with sort of my weight, my back. I was almost turning 50. I was just like, okay, here's somebody who runs, who works out every day. And I'm a mess. I've been in the emergency room twice because my back, I gained 12 pounds. And so, God bless Instagram algorithms. I found a program. And Allie was my sales girl. And I will tell you, Allie, I am not easily persuaded, as you can imagine, because my authenticity radar is always up. So if you give me some sort of freaking sales tactic or something, I snip you out so fast, and it totally goes the other direction of what you think it's going to happen. And I remember when you shared some of your story, which was obviously quite tragic, and you were just very real. You were popping over to pictures, and thank God you were authentic, because it's changed my life. And I know that we're not here to talk about that, but I just think it's a demonstration that it was your authenticity that sold me on a program that wasn't cheap, that was a leap of faith that I had just saw on Instagram. I had been following for a year, and that you never know where people will come in and out of your life. So now here we are on your podcast, which I'm so proud of you, as I said, and talking about all the things. So anyway, I didn't want to have it be an inside thing, and thought maybe there's a lesson
how
there.
Life works. Yeah, that's definitely cool. I love the impact that you have without honestly knowing. You have no idea, but that's why whenever I do sales trainings for the girls, I'm just get curious about the person that you have in front of you, because they have a story. So be genuine, be vulnerable, so they can be vulnerable with you. but have that genuine curiosity about just getting to know someone. You never know where that's going to end up. So we always like to start off just by you giving a little bit of background of like your upbringings, where you started, how you ended up doing what you're doing right now, just so our audience can get to know you a little bit better.
Yeah, I mean, I always like to say I'm a small town girl. I was born and raised in northern Michigan, in the town of maybe 800 people. My parents, born and raised there, started dating in middle school. Aww. The same doctor that delivered them delivered me. Like, all so those things. Like, I remember later in life, when I was working actually at Aetna, and obviously we do healthcare and work with providers, and people were talking about pediatricians and how for some reason we didn't have pediatricians contracted in certain areas, and a company was mad about that. And I was like, dude, I didn't even know what a pediatrician was, because my obstetrician was my doctor. Like, we didn't have pediatricians where I grew up. Like, you had a doctor, and that doctor sat in my parents' I remember the stories of them playing cards, smoking cigarettes, waiting for my mom to go into labor with me. Like, no, pediatricians and all these specialists, it's a privilege, and we don't have that everywhere. So anyway, small town girl.
That's so funny.
But I was, I always wanted to do things a little bit differently. And I didn't know it at the time that a lot of this is retrospect. But for example, when I was in high school and middle school, it really started. I ran track, but I was a good athlete, but I was never the best. I played basketball. I was good. I was never the best. Right. And track, I wasn't the fastest. And track is something where like you can train, but you can work as hard as you freaking in your net, like there's just some genuine things in your body that don't change. Right. Like there's some nature there that you can't. And so I ended up running the hurdles. Now I'm not even 5'3". Running the hurdles is like the most ludicrous thing that you should be doing as a 5'3" person.
Yeah.
But I did, and I didn't really get it at the time, but there's this pattern with me that is, well, I can compete on the usual, but that's hard. It's a lot easier to compete on the unusual. So I'm always looking. So then I went off to college. Now I graduated second in my class, which by the way is not that big a deal because we're like 83 people, but I was behind Amy Beckwith the whole way, but I was number 2. And so I could have gone to University of Michigan. Everybody knows that, which is mostly people from New York, by the way. I could have gone to big schools. Well, I went to Western Michigan University. Now, a great school, but not a, brand name that most people have heard of. It's 30,000 plus deep. It's a big school, and I don't regret it for a second. But, I went there because, like, hardly anybody else from our school went there. And so I didn't want to just go to Michigan State where everybody, I just always wanted to do a little bit different. And what I've realized is that it's just a lot more fun. It's, if you're doing what everybody else is doing, the only way you win is by doing better, working harder. Mm-hmm. That's not fun. Mm-hmm. That's not me. But working different and more uniquely. And so went from there, got an internship with Aetna, in their actuarial program. So I was a math major because I was good at math. I didn't know what I was going to do with it. And actually that came up because my roommate came home one day. She was a year older than me. And I was sitting on the couch, probably drinking a Zima and watching 90210 and, not thinking about my future self. Yeah. And she's like, oh my God, I found it, Erin. I found the career for you. And I was like, okay, Amy, whatever. And she's like, no, it's high pay, low stress. And so of course I was like, okay, that sounds interesting. And she's like, it's called an actuary. Now, you guys, you laugh, right? Because most people know that what an actuary is. It's basically the most boring, personality job ever. But this is 1995. Okay. So, young ladies, you couldn't Google it.
Yeah.
Is actually, and they were like, it's not cool. So I went to a library and found the pamphlet and basically made phone calls. It was crazy times. We had to call people and got an interview. And like I like to say, I swindled Aetna out in Connecticut into hiring me into what was a kind of prestigious program. They have every year, they hire about 12, they call them actuarial students, but there's our new people in this actuarial program that rotate around. And then you take these professional exams. And so for the next 3 years, I took 7 exams. And I failed 7 exams. I went from salutatorian in my class to literally not passing a 1. Now, what Amy did not tell me was that you have to be good at math, but these exams are graded on a curve. So guess what happens when all the good people at math take an exam? So it gets a lot harder. And so I quit before they kicked me out. And but the great news is I was at a great company. It was 50,000 people deep, plenty of opportunity. I, of course, was bold and raising my hand for things and figuring out how to do things and had a personality. And so, opportunities slowly crept up, and I, got hired for things I was really unqualified to do. And then eventually joined one of the subsidiary companies. And it was post-acquisition. They had just acquired the company about 6 months earlier. And so I knew it was a growing industry. I also was kind of smart enough to know that the leadership team would probably turn over the next year or two, because a lot of the acquired people, they're not going to stick around to the BS of a big company, right? And I stuck around long enough that they eventually ran out of people leaving, that I became the CEO, which is a flippant way of saying,
let's go.
I'm not sure I deserved it, but also as women, I did deserve it. And so what happened was, when I took over, it sounds super sexy, but we were like the laughing stock of and I don't mean that actually in a good way. I mean in a really bad way, of the parent. It was an integration gone bad. We had messed up a lot of clients. Our earnings were sort of flat for 5 years. So when you don't grow your earnings, you can't grow your technology, your people, you can't reinvest. And so we were not super well respected. And so people were like, oh, congratulations. Like, good luck with that. And I'm happy to say, over 3 years, I led it for 3 years. I was COO for a year, and then I was CEO for 3 years. Our earnings went from 17 million to 50 million. We tripled them. Our employee engagement, which is like, the fancy term for people give a shit about their job, which is kind of important, went up 15 percentage points in just 2 years, which is kind of an incredible jump, especially when you have people. We had people in call center. We had about 1,000 people. So like you have people in some really tough jobs. So it wasn't people sitting around like, the home office. And what was interesting, and so it sounds crazy, then I was just ready for something new. And our parent president of Aetna was like throwing all these things at me, and which I sound conceited. Like, I don't mean that, but she was, my stakes were high. Like, I had turned this company around, but none of it sounded good. And I also, this is really important, I think, for your listeners. As much success as we had, and I never had what I would consider traditional imposter syndrome. I had gotten that memo. Like, you gotta be a little uncomfortable. You gotta get over your skis. Like, you're not always gonna have I had gotten that memo, but I did still always kind of feel like I had been getting lucky, and I was sort of waiting for to be found out. Like, I was waiting for that run, like that luck run out. And here's why. I would go to monthly operating meetings, quarterly business review meetings. And this was back in the day when you're literally sitting in the room with 95% of the leaders, your peers, right, that are running the other businesses like yours. And they were just sacrificing so much, right? They were traveling, especially the men. They were on a plane every week, meeting with clients and having steak dinners. My friend Kristen moved her family 3 times in like 5 years to take on different roles. I was like, we're not doing that. I was very settled here. Giving up vacations, and in my head, I thought, in order to have success, you have to, each time you go up the ladder, you have to sacrifice more and more and give up time with your family and get on those planes and be stuffier. Even when I say sacrifice, even I'm not that fun loving person I was. And so I decided to retire. I was like, I am just yearning. 22 years in the corporate world, I'm yearning for something more entrepreneurial. Didn't know it was this at all. I did some other things first. This is what we do, right? Yeah. But when I went to retire, everybody kept saying, we're going to miss your authenticity, or we're going to miss your authentic leadership. Every email and card, it just kept coming up. And I hadn't been called that before. It's not like I was surprised to be called it, but it wasn't something that people said on the regular. Mm-hmm. And so it hit me after so many of those. I kind of sat back and I thought, you know what? I wasn't getting lucky. I was just using a different strategy as everything else. And upon more reflection, realized that I was literally using authenticity both as my strategy in my career to rise in my career, but of course, also to have results, which helps you rise in your career. And that's, it helped me get the best talent. We're going out on the street, like there's this executive that's, approachable, authentic, use whatever word, right? Cool. Not normal, not stuffy, not mean. Like the bar's actually kind of low. Like I was actually nice. Executives would trust me because I would go into meetings and I wouldn't bullshit them, right? I wouldn't, so many would everything's green and yellow and here's everything. And like those leaders know that like no business doesn't have red at some point. Yeah. You always have something that is it's whack-a-mole, right? It might be your operations, it might be your sales, it might be your retention, it might be, whatever, implementation of your product portfolio. Negotiations. We had major negotiations that we had to redo. I didn't know what I was doing. I literally went into one negotiation and I was like, what's important to you? And he was like, he puked up because he wasn't expecting it. So he told me the truth, which gave me some good golden nuggets. And then he turned it back on me and I was like, well, I'm interim CEO right now and I'd love to be the actual CEO. So if I get a good deal on this, it'll probably help me. And it's funny and it's kind of ridiculous.
Did it work?
And I don't teach that transparency and authenticity are the same thing, but that guy went to bat for me. And we went from, they wanted to raise our rates like 10%, and we ended up with a deal where we got 10% lower rates after that 6-month negotiation because he cared about me having success and he wanted to work with me. He didn't want another schmuck to come in and probably pound him over the head. And so all of that to say, I had this epiphany that authenticity was my secret to success. And then spent a lot of time trying out some other things, but at the same time reflecting, blogging, researching. And what I realized is that authenticity is something tangible. It is not simply be yourself. There's a richer definition of it and that you can take action against it, especially in the working world where it's so easy to kind of get caught up in the inauthentic river and flow. And when I figured all that out, I was like, oh, damn, I got to go out and I talk about it. And here I am 6 years later, still Tom Cruise on Oprah's couch, excited, preaching about authenticity.
That's awesome.
That is such a cool story.
That's a cool story. Yeah. From the corporate world to doing what you do today. It's such a huge difference.
And I'm imagining in the days that you were in your corporate world, I feel like authenticity is kind of a big buzzword right now. And with social media, people are show up authentic with no makeup on your stories and da-da-da-da-da. Now it's kind of trendy. But I imagine in those days and those scenarios, that was probably completely outside of the norm.
It was, and I will tell you, it's trendy on Instagram. It is not still trendy in the business world.
Hit that subscribe button and follow along with us on social media at The Good Seed Media. And stay tuned for all the updates and more information.